Rabbi says, let's talk a little about tzedaka, money. V'echol asher titen li, says Yaakov Avinu, aser ha'asrenu lach, I'll give myself. The Gemara in Ksubis Daf Nun says, Be'usha tiknu, Chazal made a takana in the place called Usha, hamevazbez, al yevazbez, yoiser michomesh. When you give tzedakah and you give for a mitzvah, you cannot spend more than 20%. Yoiser michomesh, don't give. Why not? Why not? After in this mitzvah called tzedakah, you should be able to give much more. That's what Rashi explains this takana. But it shouldn't work for tzedakah. It should work for all other mitzvahs, not for tzedakah. Why? Yoredei Simin Reish Mem Zayin Shulchan Aruch in Seif Beis quotes the Rambam, and he says, Le'oilam ein adam ma'ani min hatzedakah. No one will ever become poor from giving tzedakah. Velo dvar ra, velo hezek nisgalgel al yada. No harm will come to you if you give tzedakah. So what's the problem? Why is it? Because the Pasuk says, V'haya ma'aseh tzedakah shalom. Tzedakah only brings peace and harmony and great things. In fact, you can become rich if you give tzedakah. So you're going to become poor because giving too much tzedakah? How does that work? No, you can become poor. You can't become poor with tzedakah. From other mitzvahs, yeah. You buy an esok, the esok that's worth half of your house, that you shouldn't do. But tzedakah is going to give you money. So you're not going to become poor. So why not spend more than 20%? A few reasons. Or Chaim HaKodesh has a sefer called Rishon LeZion An Yoredea, and he explains, based on Tanis Daf Tes Amud Aleph, we're talking about a case when the anim would like to have some more money, but it's not like they're starving to death. So when you're not obligated, and you give more than the 20%, you can become poor. You don't have this promise that you will become rich from tzedakah. When you are obligated, in fact, you can give. If the ani comes, and he's starving to death, literally, and you say, sorry, I already gave my 20% obligation, come next month. He's not going to be around next month. Of course you can give more. But when you're not obligated, and you give more, you don't have this promise. And therefore you can become poor, and that's why only give up to 20%. The Buchacher, the Bavam Buchach, in Birkas Avram in his Sefer, in page Kuf Samechei, he explains differently. A person will not be lacking anything of tzedakah when he gives it l'shem shamayim. When he wakes up to do it because of, he decided, not because he was propelled by others. Even if afterwards he will give it l'shem shamayim. Do you know really why you give tzedakah? Do you want your name to be on the plaque? Do you want the gabbai to mention your name? Do you want your wife to know you? Is it really 100% l'shem shamayim? Do you know what you're doing is mamash 100% l'shem shamayim? Not so sure. You don't have that promise. Only if you know you did it 100% l'shem shamayim. Who can testify about himself? All I do is l'shem shamayim.
Not the Rambam.
The Rambam apparently is talking, according to him, when you do it l'shem shamayim. Then no, when you do things l'shem shamayim, you're not going to be harmed. The pasuk in Malachi says, "Uvachanuni na bazois im lo yeftach lachem esaru b'os hashamayim." Test me. It's the only mitzvah that you can. First of all, some say this test and this mitzvah is only about what grows in your field, because this mitzvah is aser te'aser es. It's called what? Tuvah has nothing to do with your money that you make in the stock market. We have a three-way machlokes about meiser today. Is it deoraisa? Meiser ksafim, money. Is it deoraisa? Is it derabanon? Is it a minhag tov be'alma? Lemaiser we paskin, it's minhag tov be'alma. Who says the avtacha of bachanuni na bazois goes on a minhag tov? Maybe only on a deoraisa level. Different opinions on that. It's good to know that the Gaon Mivilna says that this avtacha, you're going to become rich. Ubachanuni na bazois only applies when a person gives 20% and not 10%. 10% is called ayin beinonis in the eyes of Chazal. 20% is ayin toiva, and has to be an isu after isu. Aser te'aser gives 10% and then give another 10% and exact. Then you have a avtacha, says the Gaon Mivilna, you're going to become rich. And by the way, when will you become rich? It doesn't say when. Doesn't say when. It could be 3 seconds later. It could be 30 years later. And do you think HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to give a person tremendous wealth when he gives 20% every single time, and he's a serial killer? He violates Shabbos. Remember what type of violation? He drives on a Yom Kippur that falls on Shabbos, eating shrimp. He's driving to the beach. But I give 20% to tzedakah. I got to become rich. Not so sure about that. When everything is okay, so there's an extra bonus, you're going to become rich. But Kosh Baruch Hu doesn't work for us. We work for him. So not sure. And by the way, who says what type of a wealth? Eze Washir. Asamech Bechelko. Maybe finally he's going to be happy with what he has. In Yoredei Arei Samechei, the Rema says, one who's a sandak is going to become rich. Somebody once came to the stipend, says, Rebbe, we know about your overdraft in the bank. It's pretty big and it's getting bigger. Where's the Haftacha of the Rema? You're a sandak not once a year. A sandak multiple times a day. I saw by Reb Chaim Kanievsky, sometimes he was 10 brisos back to back, 10. They're very efficient there. They only call him when everything is ready. He comes in, about 2.5 minutes a bris. Next. 10 brises, 15 minutes he's out of there. Where's the money? The Rema promises you a big check. Where's the money? Stapler says, I'm very rich. He says, what do you mean? Come. He takes him into the inner chamber and he shows him on the shelf all the Kehilos Yaakov that he authored. He says, that's my wealth. I don't need anything else. What is all the wealth, the physical wealth that we consider wealth, going to do for me? When I leave the world, am I going to take it with me? But the Kehilos Yaakov I'm taking with me. So it depends. To each his own. It could be a more simple understanding. The promise that tzedaka will never make you go poor is if you listen to the instructions of the same Chazal who tell you, by the way, don't ever give more than 20%. Or, and som chilalanes. You're right, there's a haftacha from Chazal, you're never going to be harmed from giving tzedaka. But you can't act in a way which is above teva. And som chilalanes, you can't rely on a nes. And if you give too much money, you're going to be missing some money and you can become poor. A person must go according to the Gedarim, the instructions, the directives of Chazal, and then everything works out. So after all this, tell you a Maise, you all know this Maise, Hillel Lazakya, Yom Adaf Lamedei. The Gemara says, when one goes upstairs after 120 at least, they asked him, how come you didn't sit and learn? Why didn't you learn? He said, what do you mean? You know my financial situation. I was so poor, I couldn't. So they tell him, were you poorer than Hillel Lazakin? Do you know Hillel was so poor? He worked and he only earned $1 a day. And half of that dollar he gave to the guard at the entrance of the Beis Mikdash because he wanted to sit and learn Divrei Torah. Were you poorer than him? Did you only earn $1 a day? You go to Shachris in any shul, you'll get more than $1. And then the guy doesn't have what to answer. Who gave Hillel permission to give more than 20%? He gave half of what he earned. He earned $1, he gave 50 cents. He gave more than 20%, much more. He gave 50% every single day of his earnings. Who gave him permission? Up to 20%. The Rema says, Or Chaim, Tafresh Nun Vav, you're only allowed to spend 20% for a mitzvah. Who gave Hillel permission to spend 50%? Did he get permission?
There's also heat in the Beis Mikdash.
What's that?
There's also, he's nana from going in the Beis Mikdash. It's warm, there's heat there. There's a coffee room.
Go to the subway station, you know, how did it over there?
He went in, he paid, but he got to get into the place. He had to see.
She's saying he didn't go to learn Torah.
He did.
He didn't. He was very comfortable. He probably also had coffee. You think it was heated there? Torah shelamadati be'af miskayim ali. Language of the Medrash. Torah mitoch adchak. I don't think it was heated there. Let's say it was heated. You think Hillel cares about the heat? The proof is from that Maaseh that Hillel goes when? In the middle of Tkufat Tevis, the Gemara says, in the coldest day of the year, and he sits on the roof from the outside, and it starts snowing, and he almost dies. He doesn't care about heat, he cares about Divrei Torah. Why did he go there? Lishmoa Divrei Elokim Chaim, the language of the Gemara. He wanted to hear Shmaya and Avtalion. Divrei Elokim Chaim. He only cares about Torah. He's spending the money for the mitzvah. You have to assume there are other places that you can go, shelters for people like him, that you can spend 2 cents and they allow you in because that's what the city does. So you don't have to spend 50% of your earnings to go into a heated place. He went to do it to learn Torah. He did it for a mitzvah. Who gave him permission? Says the Avas Chesed, the Chavetz Chaim, Perek Chaf. In all other mitzvahs, you're not allowed to spend more than 20%, not Talmud Torah. Talmud Torah, you're allowed to. He brings many, many proofs to that. And this Yisod is already in the Rishonim. Shita Mekubetz, it's over there in Ksuba. In Ksuba's Daf Nun, the source of this takana, not to spend more than 20%. He brings the Medrash that Rabbi Tarfon gave Rabbi Akiva, Shis mea kanterin de kesef, a ton of money. And he says, you see, from here, you're allowed to spend more money for Talmud Torah. The Chida writes the same thing in Midbar Kedemos. Why is Talmud Torah different than all other mitzvahs? All other mitzvahs, up to 20%. Don't do more. Talmud Torah is different. Why? A few reasons. The whole reason we said is maybe you're going to become poor if you spend for a mitzvah more than 20%. You yourself are going to become poor. You're going to go walking around. Torah? Torah, you're going to become poor from spending on Torah? Avoid the Zohar Daf Yutes. Kol ha'oisek b'Torah nechasav matzlichin loy. You're going to become rich. Bismoila oisher v'chavod. You learn Torah, you become rich. So there's no chashash, you can become poor from learning Torah. Yekara mipaz v'chol chafatzecha lo yishvu ba. It's more valuable than precious stones. Mimele says the Shalosh Tshuvos Divrei Malkiel. Talmud Torah is different than all the mitzvahs. You don't have the chashash, you're going to become poor, and you can spend more than 20%. More than that, says the Avas Chesed. Again, the Chafetz Chaim in Chelek Beis Perek Chaf. By spending for Torah, you get the reward for every single minute that they're sitting and learn. Either you're sitting and learn or somebody else. Mimele for Achzakas Torah, you're allowed more than 20% because the reward for Torah corresponds to everything. More than that, when you're learning Torah, you're going to find out how to be careful not to transgress a negative mitzvah. Lo yisaseh. And for lo yisaseh, how much money do you have to spend? Everything. For a positive mitzvah, up to 20%. For lo yisaseh, you have to be willing to spend kol me'odecha, everything you own. By learning Torah, you'll know exactly how to do that. Mainly, you're allowed to spend more than 20%. More than that, the Gaon Mevina, in the beginning of Maseches Peah says, for every single word you say, Amar, Abaye, that's already 2 words. 2 mitzvahs of Talmud Torah. It's an ongoing mitzvah. Every single second. So I'm not spending money on a Talmud Torah. On many Talmuds Torahs. Every single word is another mitzvah. Every single minute I'm nullifying an aseh if I'm not doing it. And it's similar to the mezuzah. Mezuzah, every single minute, if you don't have a mezuzah on your doorpost, you're nullifying a mitzvah's aseh, and you're allowed to spend more than a chomish, more than 20%. Talmud Torah would be the same. Or, differently, we see in this ma'aseh, we just said, Hillel was willing to be Moiseh Nefesh. Moiseh Nefesh Mamish. He went up there, he was buried by the snow, Mamish, he almost died. The pasuk says, Kol asher le'ish yiten be'ad nafshoy. You see that? For Hillel, that's everything. For Hillel, without Torah, it's a pikuach nefesh. So he didn't give it for Talmud Torah. He gave it for himself a pikuach nefesh. Without it, he can't live. So far, of course, in a case like that, your name is Hillel, you can spend more than 20%. Or in a different way, the Biur Halacha in Taf Reish Nun Vav, the source of our problem, that you can't give more than 20% to a mitzvah. He says, wait a second, if this is true, how come in Kiddushin Chavtes Amud Beis we learn for Pidyon Haben, if all you have is 5 sla'im, you're allowed to give it. Why? It's much more than 20% of what you have. You only have 5 sla'im and you're allowed to give it. Explains the Biur Halacha. To give for a mitzvah you can't more than 20%. But to give for a mitzvah that the real value is a certain amount and then happens to be more than 20% of what you have, you're allowed to. In other words, Pidyon Haben is valued at 5 sla'im. It's not that I want to spend a lot of money for it. That's the going rate. It's 5 sla'im. That's the value. Mimele, if they took from every person coming into the best medrash that same $50, so Hillel is not spending too much. He is spending exactly the value of the mitzvah. In that case, you would be able to spend more than 20%.